What's going on, you guys? So I'm here with a new video today, and today I'm here to bring you a video that I've never really done before, but hopefully you guys do enjoy it. I'm here to talk about all the possible sleeper decks that I can think of for this May/June 2020 format. If you guys are new here, consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, you guys will be notified whenever I upload. Yeah, this is pretty crazy, so I think that there are a plethora of decks that can be played this format. There are so many decks that can be played, so many decks that don't get enough credit, and I talked to you guys in the community tab about this, and originally this was going to be a top 5, and then I realized, oh man, you know, it's definitely going to be more than 5, like I need to do something about it, because it's obviously going to be more than that, so that's what we decided to do. We decided to just include as many as possible. I took as many of your suggestions as possible, and I just compiled a list, and I'll go through each one, so hopefully you guys do enjoy, and I'll explain why, you know, whatever you guys see here, what card represents what, but we're going to get into it, so I hope you guys do all enjoy, and if this does do well, I will continue this segment every format. So right now, we don't have a ban list, so if a ban list comes out, obviously this will change, but for the first one, we might as well just get into what our options are. So right now, before I begin, it's been solidified that there are two best decks in the format, in the form of the Rock deck or Eldritch in some form. Now, Eldritch can come in the form of the Synchro build, which is the highly played one. It could be in the Stun build. It could be in the Invoked build. There's so many ways to play Eldritch, but for the most part, those are the two best decks. Those are the two most represented decks. And everything else, I hate to say it, has been kind of cast to the wayside. Obviously, Strikers came and won an event, so that opened a lot of eyes. Other decks have done things, so we'll talk about those as well. But I think that there's a ton of decks that need to be talked about this format, because you definitely can play something besides those two decks. But anyways, we'll start with Dinosaurs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Dinosaurs, because Dinosaurs are very straightforward. They're very good at what they do. They can build a board going first, going second. They can just kill you, like literally just kill you with the cards they can produce. Now that they got their new level 1, they have even more synergy. This main guy, Ultimate Conductor, is just absolutely insane. He just breaks an entire board and just destroys your opponent's life. I think Dinos are a fantastic deck. They're a deck that I'm trying to learn to play better, because I really do like the deck. I respect the deck a lot. The deck being able to destroy babies, being able to play cards like Lost World and other stuff like that, makes it to where the deck is just really insane, and I think it's very underrated. It's definitely, I don't know if it would be considered in the top 5 decks of the format. It's really hard to do a top 5 because of the fact that you're only seeing a lot of representation of 2 decks, but I think if we had more like actual in real life events, we'd see more decks play. But I definitely would not sleep on Dinos. I think they're a fantastic deck. They're a consistent deck. They're a beat stick deck, and they're very good at what they do. Setting up True King of all calamities, setting up Logia, Dolka, Ultimate Conductor, all those things makes this deck insane, so I'm a huge fan of it. So it's definitely a deck that belongs on this list. Now, one thing I'm going to say before I continue is that there's no real ranking for these. These are just the decks that I feel that are underrated and need to be appreciated more in the format. Next, I got Mecha Knight. Now, Mecha Knight can be in the form of Mecha Knight Invoked, pure Mecha Knights, whatever you guys want to play. If you guys come to my streams, you guys already know that I play pure Mecha Knights a lot. I really love the deck. I love the deck a lot. It's a deck that I've been trying out just in case they do hit the Alistar package in some shape or form, but I think Mecha Knights are great. Being able to go second, you can just break an entire board. If your opponent plays sloppy and plays into the columns, you get free summons. Purple's an amazing card, obviously, being able to search out all your Mech Knights at will. I think the deck is another super underrated deck. I don't think it gets enough appreciation because, you know, you think of the deck, you think of Alistar, like Mech Knight Invoked has been around for a really long time, and it has had some success, but I think it's definitely a deck that more people should pay attention to. It can also play the Neos package. You guys already know this, so it's very, very strong. And like I said, I think pure Mech Knight is fantastic, especially with the inclusion, with the new card from Edco, Mech Knight Gear Suit. I think that card just added a whole bunch of more cool options that you can do with the deck. As you guys have seen me do on stream, there's a lot of great things you can do with it, so I definitely would not sleep on Mech Knights either. I don't need to say it. This deck is scary as all hell. It hand loops you. That's disgusting. But hey, I mean, besides the Rock deck doing its thing for 20 minutes, beside the Eldritch deck doing its thing, this deck has always just kind of been there. Mermail's just kind of been there, and it really takes a good pilot to play the deck. I think the deck is very strong. It can hand loop you. Mooling Glacier is a hell of a card. This deck can go second and just destroy your life. It can go first and just loop your hand. I think that if you know how to play this deck, if you have access to this deck, deck and you're very good with this deck, this should be the deck you play, because I think this deck is insane. I think this is definitely a deck that is starting to get more credibility, but it's also a deck that hasn't really gotten enough spotlight. But if you look around YouTube, you see a lot of people talking about it. There's like 1 and 2 card combos, 3 card combos. I don't really know because I don't play the deck myself, but there are so many ways to hand loop your opponent that I think this deck is just nuts. So if you have this deck, definitely don't sleep on it. I think it's one of the most underrated decks of the format because it is very, very scary, and I think it's something that you guys should definitely pay attention to. Mermail can also just beat face and OTK you, but in addition to that, like I said, they can hand loop you, which by itself is just crazy. So definitely have Mermail on here. Next, I have Orcas. So again, with the release of Mech Knight or Mech Knight Girsu, Mech Knight Girsu obviously can be played in Mech Knights, but it also is ridiculous in Orcas. It's their own built-in Armageddon Knight, which I think is just crazy. You can make it to where your guy becomes a tuner. There's so many things you can do with Orcas, and I think that, you know, now with the release of it, once Etco comes out, you know, here in NA, they do have it in Europe, but once it comes out here in NA, I think more people are going to be playing Orcas. Give Orcas a chance. The field spell is still nuts. Babel is still ridiculous. Orcas has been one of those splashable engines that people use for so long, but I think that they can kind of come into their own, especially with the scrap engine, and just totally just body people. And I think that this is another deck you definitely should not sleep on. If you go on Nimnim's channel, you guys can see a really good build of Orcas, like new format scrap Orcas with Mech Girsu, so definitely check that out. That'll give you guys some ideas for those of you that are trying to revisit Orcas this format, but I definitely would not underestimate this deck either. Next, I've got Heroes. I don't know why people sleep on Heroes. I don't know what the reason is. It's one of those decks that can go first or second. It can kill you going second. It can build a simple board that can disrupt you going first, like Plasma Darklaw is still pretty scary. You rip cards out of your opponent's hand and they get banished because of Darklaw. I think this deck is like extremely consistent. It's very good at what it does. I don't know why this deck doesn't get enough attention. I feel like maybe it's that it's not heavily played enough by enough players here in NA, but I think that if we saw more people playing it, it would definitely get more attention. I'm a fan of the deck. I think the deck's very strong. I've played against it a lot in previous formats, and I think that it's just another deck that you really can't afford to sleep on. Like, I don't understand. I think most of these decks on here, why people don't pay attention to them. I think it's because they don't want to admit that these decks are real, but they are very real, and I think that Heroes is just another one of those decks. You definitely need to pay attention to this deck, this format. It may be underrated. It may not be well represented, but if you don't prepare for it, it's definitely going to catch you by surprise. So I definitely am a huge fan of Heroes, and I want to see what they continue to do. I'm not going to spend too much time on Reyes Bay. You guys already know it won the last luxury card gaming tournament. Ryan Yu is a god. The deck is fantastic in the hands of the right pilot. It's a very good control deck. If you know what you're doing, play this deck. The deck is still insane. It's proven itself. Like I said, if you're a good pilot with it, if you know what you're doing, this is the deck for you. Other than that, I'm not going to waste more time on it. The deck is still very good. Underrated, it was. I still have it on here because it is still underrated. It's still a sleeper deck, and it was the ultimate sleeper deck because clearly it came out of nowhere and won that tournament. But yeah, if you can play Sky Strikers, it's definitely a ridiculous deck to play this format if you know what you're doing. This one, I don't know how to feel. I have it on here because you guys suggested it, Plunder Patrol. So I have played against this deck. This deck has smacked me up a couple times. I've smacked it up a couple times. I don't really know how I feel about this deck. I think because I just don't fully understand it. I think it's one of those decks that it'll take you by surprise if you don't know what the cards do, but I don't know how effective it's going to be in this format. But I do have it on here again because any deck that you're unfamiliar with can definitely take you by surprise. So out of respect for everyone who mentioned it, I do have Plunder Patrol on here. Anyone in the comments that understands this deck clearly better than I do, please let me know why you feel the deck is underrated. I wanted to include it on here because I felt it was fair to you guys, but I myself am not super familiar with it. I do know that it equips a lot. I do know it summons from its extra deck a lot, so it can do a lot of like nifty things on the opponent's turn as well. So I think the deck does have potential. I just am not super familiar with it, but again, I wanted to include it on this list. Next, anything with Alistar. It could be Eldritch invoked. It can be invoked with hand traps. It could be invoke Mech Knight. It could be whatever. Anything with Alistar is ridiculous. I love Alistar. The end. That's all I can honestly say. I think anything with Alistar will find a way to be good this format. There's just no way around it. That's all I can say. Next, I got Madolche. So all I personally know about Madolche is they can OTK you going second very effectively. Going first, I don't know what they exactly do. Again, it's not a deck I've played against a lot, but I have heard about its representation. So I think it's definitely a deck that we should pay attention to this format. Any deck that can go first or go second is very scary, especially those going second decks that when you're not prepared for it, it can take you by surprise. But I definitely have Madolche on here as well because, again, in the hands of a skilled pilot, the deck can totally just body you. So I wanted to include it as well. I feel weird about having this on underrated. I'm going to be honest with you guys because I have played in the format where this has been one of the most represented decks. It's very hard to say that this deck is underrated. I want to say it's underrepresented more so, but again, I'm including it based off your guys' list in the community tab. I don't know how to feel about saying it's underrated, but I think Salamangreat is still a good deck. I think that it's just, again, it's in the hands of the right pilot. I think that a lot of these decks come down to the pilot, and that's one thing I like to stress a lot. I myself am not the best pilot with every kind of deck. You guys know this. You guys have seen me mess up on stream with Dinos. You've seen me mess up with Mermails. You've seen me mess up with a lot of decks, but there are decks I'm very good with. Like, I'm good with Mecha Knights. I'm good with Alistar, stuff like that. Salamangreat is, again, one of those decks I'm not super good with, but I played against it enough to know that I think the deck is still very good and should definitely not be underrated or slept on this format. I think people who were playing Salad before are still playing the deck and have found a way to innovate it, and I think the deck is still really strong. So again, don't sleep on this deck. You will definitely get caught by surprise if you do. I think the deck still has the potential to do well this format, and this is all before ban list, so we don't know what's going to happen in a new list. It could destroy the format, and then this deck could be #1 again, so we'll see what happens. Next, I've got Shaddolls. I mean, I think Shaddolls are great. I love Shaddolls. Invoke Shaddolls, you know, Shaddol, Dinos, whatever kind of build of Shaddolls you want to make, pure Shaddolls. Shaddolls, they waited years to come back, like years to come back into the format, like 4 or 5 years to come back into the format. And with Invoked, they were able to come back. And I think the deck is still really good. I think the deck is underrated. I think that not enough people give it, enough credit. Construct is still a busted card. Being able to fuse on your opponent's turn is a busted thing with Shaddol Fusion. Being able to take advantage of their extra deck monster. Being able to play Winda and lock Winda is insane. I think people need to remember that Winda is still a hell of a card. And if you don't have a card like Dark Ruler or a card to shut it down, you really just can't play Yu-Gi-Oh! So I think Shaddolls, whether it be Dino Shaddolls, Shaddol Invoked, Pure Shaddolls, whatever kind of build of Shaddolls, I think the deck is still really good this format. So I still include it because I feel that it's unfair to disregard any of these decks. And then BA just won a tournament. Yeah, BA just won a tournament. So what can I say? BA is still BA. It still summons Dante's. It still makes Beatrice. It still does things. It still has Cherubini. It still can do a lot of things. I think that, again, in the hands of the right pilot, this deck will still see success. I think it's underrated. It's always been underrated, but I think a lot of people still play it because they love the deck. They're very true to the deck. The deck's been around for so long. I think that, again, if you pilot it right, if you play it right in the right format, I think you'll have a lot of success with it. I think BA is a very strong deck, and I think that it's another deck that you definitely should not underestimate. People have played a trap build of it. They played a heavy combo build of it. I think whatever build of it you play, again, if you know what you're doing, you're going to be able to take your advantage over your opponent, because a lot of people just disregard decks like this, and I think that's super wrong in this format. Like, you may think there's only 2 decks in the format, but when you get into bigger and bigger tournaments in the early round, the later rounds, you're going to play a lot of decks. So I think it's important to just pay attention to everything. And then down here, I have all the dirty culprits. Before I begin, Grenmaju is in here for stun, but it's also in here for danger Grenmaju. Personal favorite deck of mine. You guys know this. I don't know if, if this is going to be something that continues, but I think the deck should definitely maybe see more representation. I'd love for it to see more representation. Going second, it can just break an entire board and OTK the opponent. Potted Desires, Grenmaju, Gizmek can just kill the opponent, so I wouldn't sleep on it. The rest of these are all stun decks. This is if you want to be the asshole that plays Mystic Mind Burn. I'm just saying, any deck that plays Mystic Mind and can slap it down, go in second, the opponent doesn't have an out, you're going to win. So I just had to mention it whether I wanted to or not. And over here I got Subterror, Geist, and some kind of stun build, Border Stun, whatever kind of stun deck you want to play. I think any of these decks can do well this format. I think they're all just super underrated. They're a bunch of trap decks. Yes, they still lose to the same thing traps decks do, but if they go first, they set up, their monsters with traps you really can't play. So they had to be included here because I feel it would be unfair to disregard any kind of stun deck, any kind of trap deck, any kind of deck that can just get the advantage on you if you're not prepared. Like, they can go summon Border set 4 and you may not have an out. So just remember that before you disregard these decks. They may not be fun to play against, but again, I've always believed that you need to prepare for every possible deck in the format. But this is my list of underrated / sleeper decks this format. I think a sleeper deck is defined as a deck that is slept on, obviously, and a deck that's underrated and a deck that's underrepresented in a format where it could actually do well. This is my list. Let me know if I missed some decks. I'm sure I did. Let me know any possible decks you think should be on here and why. Just let me know in the comments below. Again, if you know about Plunder Patrol, please let me know. It definitely helped me out to make a better list for you guys. But if we have a ban list coming up, obviously this list will change. But if you did enjoy this video, please give this video a like. It helps more than you know. That will let me know you enjoyed it, and I will also continue this segment here on the channel in this format. I think it makes it very visually appealing feeling is you can figure out exactly what I'm talking about instead of waiting for cards to pop up on the screen. But I think this way we have a good discussion about it, and I think we can really see the potential of all these decks as format. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.